What up, my dudes? This is Mr. Gardner, and this is Math Time with Mr. G. Today we're just going to work on solving quadratic equations using square roots. It's kind of wordy. There's a lot of small steps, but the overall concept is super easy. So, just a couple things to remember. When I have x squared, to get rid of that square, I square root because those are opposites. And what I do to one side, I have to do to the other, which is going to leave me with x by itself, the square root of 81. This is saying, what are my pairs? Because there's a square, right? So 9 times 9, and that's what gets pulled out. But here's the issue. 9 times 9 gets me to 81, but also negative 9 times negative 9 gets me to 81. So when we write our answer, we're going to write x equals positive 9 and negative 9 get us to it. So now let's look at x squared is equal to negative 81. So same thing, I'm going to square root both sides. But here's the issue. Now I have the square root of negative 81, which is saying what two numbers multiply together to get to 81? It would be negative 9 and 9 to get me to negative 81. But these aren't the same. One's negative and one's positive. So this isn't possible. So right now, we're going to write no solution. Later in your math career, you'll learn that this negative inside a radical is an imaginary number. So the only thing I could do more is make it a little bit complex by saying you have to do all this extra math to get to the x squared. But all I'm going to do is subtract 17 from both sides. These are going to cancel. I'm left with 3x squared is equal to 192. I'm going to divide both sides by 3. And I get 64. And then I'm going to square root both sides. And that's going to give me positive 8 or negative 8. Alright, for our next example, I'm going to add 19 to both sides. And then I'm left with negative 5x squared is equal to 163. I'm going to divide both sides by negative 5. And then I get x squared is equal to negative 32.5. Then I'm going to square root both sides. I get x is equal to, and I'm going to stop right here because now I have a negative number inside a square root, and I'm going to say no solution. So there's two types of word problems that they might ask you with this, and it's given these three shapes, tell me what the area of a triangle is. So let's stop and be smart. Let's first ask, what's the area of a triangle? Area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height. Some teachers write it base times height divided by 2. So let's figure out what our base is. Our base is this triangle piece right here. To find it, assuming that this is a square, we have to find the area of a square. And the area of a square is just length squared, right? So if my area is 49, and I have to find my length, that means I square root both sides. I'm going to get positive or negative 7L. The thing with this word problem, because it's an area in a feet, we can't have negative feet. So we assume that it's just going to be positive 7 for L, which means our area for our triangle, for our base, is 7 times h over 2. Alright? Next we just have to find the area of this guy, or the side for this guy using this area. So I'm going to have 576 is equal to, and I'm going to call it h squared for my height. So then I square root both sides to get h all by itself. And my square root for 756 is going to be 24. So now that I know that h is 24, I can go back to my area, and it's going to be 7 times 24 divided by 2, which gets me 168 over 2 for an area of 84. And the only thing that they might get you on is that it's going to be feet squared, because it's an area. The last type of word problem they might ask you is, what is this diagonal line? So let's picture that they had this tower on the ground, on the base right here, in here, and they attached a wire to the end right here. Then they lifted the tower up with the cable going with it. So that means that we know that the tower and on the ground are the exact same side, which means that we can find this guy wire. Well, they were measuring it as they pulled it up and said it was 200 feet, which means that this whole triangle is going to be easily measured as a squared plus b squared equals c squared, which means a is x, we don't know it. B is also x, we don't know it. But c is 200 feet. When we are adding exponents, if they have the same base and the same exponent, which these guys do, we said, hey, we had 2 x squareds going into this. So then we can square the 200 and get 40,000. Now we can solve for x. So divide by 2, divide by 2. X squared is equal to 20,000. So now we can square root both sides. And then we would get x is equal to 141.4 feet. And we're going to say plus or minus because it's a square root, but because it's feet, we can't have negative feet, we're going to just assume it's positive. So now we know what one side is of our triangle. We don't know what z is, but we do know what this is. If this is halfway, this is 100. So that means that I had 141.4 here, 100 here, and this is z, which means going back to our equation, it's going to be a squared, I don't know, plus b squared is equal to c squared. Well, we just did this squared because we square rooted to get to that answer, so we're going to still have 20,000. Then 100 squared is going to be 10,000. Plus, we don't know what z squared is. I'm going to subtract 10,000 from both sides. So then I get z squared is equal to 10,000. Square root both sides. And then z is equal to 100. And we're going to say plus or minus 100 because it left the square root. But because we're talking about feet, we can get rid of the negative. So z is 100 feet. Hopefully that answered a lot of your questions. If you have anything else, put it in the comments section. But other than that, be kind to each other, ask lots of questions, and think deeply.